President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi meets with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Nearly 20 European ministers visit Lviv in show of support for Ukraine. And the United States announces new plan to prevent Israel and Hamas from distributing Gaza aid. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has met with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin during a summit held on the sidelines of the Russia's Victory Day celebration in Moscow. The talks were attended by senior officials from both delegations. At the outset of the meeting, President Sisi extended congratulations to the Russian people on the occasion of the Victory Day, expressing appreciation for the warm welcome. Sisi reaffirmed Egypt's appreciation for its strategic partnership with Russia, established by the Comprehensive Strategic Cooperation Agreement signed in 2018. He also praised the ongoing momentum in political dialogue and technical consultations between the two sides. The Egyptian president voiced support for the upcoming 15th session of the Joint Committee for Trade, Economic, Scientific and Technical Cooperation, set to take place in Moscow from May 12th till 15th, expressing hope for a fruitful outcome. For his part, Russian President Vladimir Putin has stated that trade between Egypt and Russia increased by 30% last year. Putin highlighted Egypt as Russia's most important trading partner in Africa. He noted that the relationship between the two nations is progressing successfully and emphasized that Cairo and Moscow's collaboration is based on strategic cooperation. Egypt has participated in the Grand Military Parade in Moscow's Red Square, commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazis Germany in World War II. Units from 13 countries, including Azerbaijan and Vietnam, participated in the event. Victory Day, celebrated annually on May 9th, honors the surrender of Nazi regime in Germany and symbolizes national pride in the sacrifices made by the Soviet people during the war. Egypt President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Moscow during the Victory Day celebrations. President Sisi reaffirmed Egypt's full support for the Palestinian cause, advocating for a ceasefire in Gaza, the release of detainees, and sufficient humanitarian aid. Abbas expressed gratitude for Egypt's efforts and highlighted the urgency of international recognition for the Palestinian state, emphasizing the importance of upcoming meetings to support a two-state solution. Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump exchanged congratulations on the 80th anniversary of the defeat of the Nazi regime in Germany, with the aides facilitating the messages, according to Putin's aide, Yuri Yushakov. The occasion was marked by a grand military parade in Moscow on Friday, celebrating the Soviet Union's victory in World War II. The event was attended by numerous world leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping. However, reports indicated that Leon Tracy, the U.S. ambassador to Russia, was not in attendance at the parade. CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund and aide to President Putin on talks with U.S. regarding Ukraine, Kirill Dmitriev, has stated that recent discussions between Russia and the United States have been highly productive, helping to prevent the outbreak of the World War III. Dmitriev's comments came shortly after the World War II Victory Day parade concluded on the Red Square. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Brazilian President Lula da Silva emphasized their shared interests during a meeting at the Kremlin today, shortly after the Victory Day parade. Lula, one of many foreign leaders visiting Moscow for the celebrations, joined a diverse group of heads of states from former Soviet Republic, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The Kremlin highlighted the attendance of these Russian allies as a sign that Russia remains connected globally, despite the absence of Western nations that were once its World War II partners. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has announced that Russian President Vladimir Putin thanked high-ranking North Korean military officials involved in operations in Russia's Kursk region. These commanders were present at the Victory Day parade, where Putin was seen shaking hands and exchanging compliments with them and other officials. Peskov also praised Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico and Serbia's President Alexander Vučić for defying EU pressure and traveling to Moscow to attend the celebrations. Chinese President Xi Jinping has participated in a grand parade at Moscow's Red Square. Leaders from over 20 countries and international organizations were invited to attend the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory in the Great Patriotic War. And for more analysis, we now move to Salma in our newsroom. To you, Salma.
Thank you, Mona. And for further analysis on Egypt's participation in Russia's Victory Day celebrations, we're joined from Cairo by Al-Ahram Managing Editor Mohammed Azzeddin. Mr. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. And first off, how does Egypt's high-level participation in Russia's Victory Day celebration enhance the bilateral relations of both countries?
Thank you so much for having me on Qnews. Of course, extending the invitation from Putin to the Egyptian President Sisi and his keenness on the Egyptian participation in this very significant ceremony that symbolizes the Russian victory means that there is a lot of appreciation to the Egyptian role and the keenness on keeping strong relations between the two sides. Of course, there is a strategic partnership signed into in 2018 between Egypt and Russia. And ever since, and even before, when President Sisi assumed office, there has been a lot of development in the relations between the two leaders, especially that they are tied and they share a military common background and they have the same views regarding the global challenges. So the development in the Russian-Egyptian relations during the past 10 years dates back to the strong relations between the two leaders and the Egyptian keenness to be a state of peace in the region that does not interfere in other states' affairs, and it wants a balanced relations with all parties. And there is also a lot of Russian investments and they have a lot of shares in different mega projects being carried out in Egypt. And consequently, there is a big role for the tourism companies and contractors to gain economic benefits from tourism, in addition also to exchanging different views on different matters, whether to cool down the tensions in the region. And
yes, sir, allow me to interrupt here because I would like to build on this point specifically. Regarding the current summit taking place between the leaders of Russia and Egypt, what are the key issues that they will focus on?
They focused on the peace process in the region and the Middle East, in addition to reducing the tensions in the areas of conflict. And there has been also keenness on strengthening the economic relations, and in a few days, from 12 to 14 May, there will be a meeting for senior officials from Egypt and Russia to discuss the economic affairs. And there is a special interest going to the investment and trade exchange, especially in the fields of energy and heavy transport, in addition to trade and industrial sectors. Russia is one of the states where Egypt imports its different needs. In addition to the increasing exports, Egyptian exports to the Russian markets, moreover, there are a lot of Russian investments, whether in the free zones or in or direct investments in Egyptian companies, and these relations will even witness further development on the investment level uh, in the upcoming years. And I expect this good meeting will be very fruitful and will reflect positively on the relations, whether at the political level or the economic and investment levels. In addition to the Egyptian participation in different economic alliances that work to reduce the effects of the geopolitical conflicts on the global economies.
Yes, sir. Sorry for cutting in, but by building on what you said, in light of the partnerships between Egypt and Russia you've just mentioned, the question here is, in what ways can Egypt leverage its partnership with Russia to benefit Africa?
This is a very important question. As stated by the Russian president himself and Egyptian senior officials dealing directly with Russia, Egypt is the first state to receive Russian investments, and Egypt and Russia both are working to increase these investments, in addition to benefiting from the geographic location of Egypt and the good relations between the Egyptian Foreign Affairs and Russia, as well as the political bearing of President Sisi. The Russian side worked to employ these Egyptian benefits to serve and expand its activity in Africa and increase its investments also in Egypt. Egypt is one of the forefront states to receive foreign direct investment in the African continent, and Russia has a really big share of these investments, and they are working to increase them in the near future, and therefore Egypt is a gateway for the Russian investments to the African continent and the Middle East region. There is a lot of development to the Russian industries, in addition to the competitive factor, which is the price, and the non-political intervention in any economic decisions, whether in the Middle East or in Africa, and therefore the Russian investments is a winning deal to both sides, Egypt and Russia. In addition, Egypt will be the real gateway for the economic breakthrough in Africa.
Now, sir, back to the significance of the Victory Day. If you can expand on the historical importance of Victory Day for Russia and also the key messages President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi intends to communicate by attending.
Of course, Victory Day is a historic day for Russia and also for the entire world. There was the victory against Nazi Germany in the Second World War, where the Russians lost around 27 million citizens, between killed and injured. And this is a victory and a return for the Russian spirit, holding on to military power and the challenge that it was impossible to defeat Germany, but they did the impossible and stopped the most intensive war in the world. So that day symbolizes pride and victory for Russia. Of course, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is a fighter and a man of an army, and he is well aware of the significance of these victory days that reflect the military victory. So his keenness and his participation to attend is a keenness to strengthen the Russian-Egyptian relations, and that there are similar views regarding most issues, if not all, whether related to Russia or Egypt. in addition to the mutual respect between the two leaders, and we wouldn't miss that there is a military group of Egyptian soldiers participated in the victory crossing with the participating task forces, which also strengthen the relations between Egypt and Russia, and the armed forces personnel were very keen to attend, and they greeted President Putin, and as he did to, in the 80th anniversary of the Victory Day, which honors the Egyptian fighter and the Egyptian armed forces, who were keen to always attend such important events in proceedings. Also, this participation was, or this invite was not extended to all world leaders. It was only a limited group of leaders, and this group included the Egyptian president, which reflects the strong ties connecting the two countries, and that they are not based on only common interests, but it is based on respect and strong relations between the two leaders and between the two countries. It is a huge event, and the Egyptian participation is highly significant, indicating the strong relations. And
Muhammad Azzeddin, thank you so much for joining us here on Q News and for all the insights. And now we go back to Mona in our studio.
Thank you so much, Salma, for your analysis. And now we turn to the latest developments in the Russo-Ukraine conflict. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has announced his country is ready to engage in talks with Russia in any format, signaling openness to a 30-day ceasefire. Zelensky said he conveyed this position to U.S. President Donald Trump during what he described as a productive phone call. According to Zelensky, Trump expressed his desire to end the war and his willingness to support efforts towards a ceasefire. The Ukrainian leader stressed that a 30-day truce would be a genuine sign of progress towards peace. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Berlin is prepared to impose more sanctions on Russia. He added that a draft EU proposal aligns with US President Donald Trump's plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine and urged Moscow to accept a long-term truce. Norway's Prime Minister says Northern European countries and UK support a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. The call follows a proposal from Donald Trump for an unconditional truce. Trump warned of more sanctions if Russia and Ukraine failed to comply. Nearly 20 European ministers visited the western Ukrainian city of Lviv on Friday in a coordinated show of support for Ukraine as Russia marked the Victory Day. The officials gathered at Lviv's military cemetery, where they lit candles and observed a moment of silence at the graves of Ukrainian soldiers. The visit comes amid renewed diplomatic efforts to pressure Moscow into accepting a 30-day ceasefire, a proposal put forward by the United States. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom announced a new round of sanctions targeting Russia's so-called shadow fleet used to circumvent restrictions on oil exports. Hungary has dismissed Ukraine's allegations of a spy network as propaganda and expelled 2 Ukrainian diplomats from Budapest, according to Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó. Speaking at a press conference, Szijjártó criticized the allegations, calling them a form of Ukrainian propaganda that should be treated with caution. He confirmed that 2 individuals identified as spies had been expelled from Hungary. Seattle accused Ukraine of frequently using anti-Hungarian propaganda, which has proven to be baseless. He linked the latest accusations to Hungary's opposition to providing military aid to Ukraine amid its ongoing conflict with Russia. And now we move on to the latest developments in Gaza. Israeli media have reported that the Trump administration is pressuring Israel to finalize a deal with Hamas before Donald Trump's upcoming visit to the region. Sources say Washington warned Israel that it would be left alone if it does not cooperate. U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff reportedly told families of Israeli detainees that military pressure puts their relatives at risk. Israeli media have also reported that the European Union is reviewing its trade relations with Israel amid rising criticism of its actions in Gaza. The review follows growing European concern about the ongoing blockade on humanitarian aid and Israel's military escalation in the enclave. The United States has said neither Israel nor Hamas would be involved in distributing humanitarian aid in Gaza under a new plan aimed at easing the deepening crisis in the enclave. U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee has confirmed the arrangement today, adding that Israel would play a role in providing security around aid operations. Aid deliveries to Gaza have sharply declined since the war began in October last year. Although aid resumed briefly during a ceasefire in January, the flow was again halted when Israel renewed its offensive in March. The announcement comes amid growing anticipation over a new aid mechanism for Gaza, where 19 months of Israeli military operations have devastated infrastructure and displaced nearly the entire population of 2.3 million people. Palestinian medical sources report that 8 people were killed in ongoing Israeli strikes on Gaza since early morning. Palestinian media confirm that they were killed when a house in central Gaza's Nusayrat camp was hit, while one person died in a separate strike on an apartment in Gaza City's Arimal neighborhood. Hospitals in Gaza say they can no longer provide food to patients after the World Central Kitchen suspended its operations. The NGO halted aid after running out of supplies due to Israel's full blockade on the enclave. Well, that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Nearly 20 European ministers visit Lviv in show of support for Ukraine. And the United States announced new plan to prevent Israel and Hamas from distributing Gaza aid. This concludes our live coverage for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching.